I'm quite nervous about this. The next stage in the restoration is the patching of the front. I've got to put a veneer inlaid into the hole we've just routed to flatten the face and make it suitable for gluing the bridge on. And I'm making this slightly complicated. I have a piece of spruce, and it's the last bit of spruce I've got. So I've got to get this right. I don't want to try and plane this down to just 1 millimetre in thickness, because I think doing that I'm going to break it in two from the force of the planing, or sanding. I could try sanding it down, but I don't think it's going to be particularly accurate, and I think I'm just going to end up just breaking the whole thing in two. I need a veneer. Now, I have a veneer. This is some form of hardwood. It's about 0.8 of a millimetre thick, and it seems perfect. It seems exactly the right sort of thickness for what I need. So why aren't I using it? This came from the not too reliable source of Camembert manufacturing. This was the edge of the box of Camembert. I don't know whether it's been waxed or injected with something, or I have no idea. So the chances are, if I was to use this, it might end up delaminating. I just don't know. If it all goes horribly wrong, I have a piece of maple, but I'd rather use spruce to match the top. This maple is flat sawn, so not the strongest thing, particularly in a laminate. Well, I don't know, a flat sawn laminate. So I'm left with my jointed piece of spruce. I actually jointed this down the middle. I made a lovely job of it. It's so flat. It's a thing of beauty. So I've got to try and get this down, and I'm going to use the bandsaw. It could go horribly wrong. I know I keep saying this throughout this series of videos, that it could go horribly wrong. Maybe I'm trying to increase the jeopardy for you. But this is a learning exercise. It hasn't gone horribly wrong too often so far. Let's hope that remains the case. So first of all, I've got to learn veneer making with a bandsaw, which might not be as straightforward as you think. Drift angles. So let's go. I've set the guide to the height that I'm going to be using for the spruce. And what I want to do is work out the drift angle for the bandsaw. The blade tends to twist when you're cutting, something I've observed in my previous attempts to cut with this bandsaw. And in order to cut veneer, we need to know that angle, because we need to set the fence at that angle so that there is no tendency for the blade to try and pull away from the work, and we get a nice consistent thickness on the veneer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and cut this piece of pine. It's not as thick as the spruce, but the grain direction is the same, so hopefully we'll get the correct results. I'm going to put a line down the middle of this. I'm going to mark 15 millimeters in. And then we shall try cutting it. And the idea is that we're going to cut this freehand and try to maintain a straight cut straight down the line. That's quite a drift angle. But what I've got to do is set a fence up parallel with this piece of work if I'm going to cut a nice straight piece of veneer. We now have our angle. That's quite severe. I wasn't expecting quite that much of an angle, but I guess that's what we're going to have to work with. It might be that I haven't got the blade tight enough. I've tightened the blade. I tightened it a lot more than you just saw then. I've given that quite a number of turns, so let's see how that cuts. That's made a small difference, not a huge difference, has to be said. It might be more to do with the way the blade is supported than the tension in the blade, but that has made a difference. So let's mark that, and we'll go with this. I'm not going to tighten the blade up anymore. It seems quite tight already. On a lot of bandsaws, it seemed that these bolts are for adjusting the angle of the fence. Not on this bandsaw though. This bandsaw is 90 degrees or nothing, so I won't be able to use this fence clamped the way it normally does. It wants to be at too oblique an angle. I'm going to use this block of oak. It's got a nicely plain surface here and a plain surface here. However, it isn't quite square. It's very, very close, but not close enough. So I'm going to have to plane this down, get it properly square, and then we'll just clamp that to the work surface. My workbench isn't ideal for this, but there we go. Before I return to the bandsaw, I'm just going to true up the one face of the spruce, and I'm going to try this. This is 40 grit, this is 100 grit, so I've put that on top of that. I hope that the friction between that and that will be greater than the friction between that and that, and I'll be able to push the whole thing forward. Yes. Oh, and now I'm going to have to hang on to the sandpaper. Yeah, that works quite well. Yeah, this is fiddly, but it will produce a completely flat surface. Yeah. Okay, I've got it set up. This was quite tricky to clamp in place. I hope it doesn't shift. But I'm just going to test it on the piece of pine that I was using earlier to check for the drift angle. So the idea is we just feed it through and we end up with a piece of veneer. I think this is going to be a bit too thick. We might have to fiddle with this a bit to get thickness right, but let's give it a go. A little thick. I'm just wondering whether the width is consistent. It needs to go a lot thinner than this. Yeah, I think it is a consistent width, although it didn't start off very well. But right, that is now actually about the thickness of my piece of spruce. So this would be a good test piece to use for the spruce. If I just cut that off. Right, let's try that. It's created a veneer. The width isn't particularly consistent, it's not smooth. But what about the thickness? The piece next to the guard, the good piece, is way too thick. It's still 2.8 millimeters thick. But the wafer that came off the other side is about right. But obviously this isn't the side we can use. It's not terribly consistent in thickness, unfortunately. Not sure. Let's adjust it and try again. It's quite a serrated surface which will need a lot of smoothing. Thickness wise, well, it's nearly there, but we need thinner. I think I might try it with the spruce, and then I'll have to try and level the surface afterwards, which will of course take the thickness down. But that's about 1.5 millimeters and 2 millimeters in places. Wish me luck. I'm going to try this with a decent spruce. At least this is thicker than the previous test piece, and so we'll actually probably be cutting straight down the middle of it, and we'll be left with two pieces. How well this is going to work though, I'm not sure. We'll see. This should result in about a millimetre and a half veneer. Oh my word. I'll get the push stick ready. There we go. And that, right. I'm quite nervous about this. Wow, that's actually not bad. That is a very nice wafer of spruce. It does have some ridges in it where I wasn't keeping the pressure constant. So with practice I could get a smooth, you know, I should have started with the push stick straight away and just kept it fed at a constant rate. But that is not bad. I'm slightly concerned that the ridge in the middle. No, we're all right. That is still wide enough. There we go. 1 point. Yeah, I think I still need to take a little bit off this. I'm going to sand the top. But that is probably as thin a shaving of spruce as I could really hope to get. And I'm quite pleased with my jointing of this, because you can't see the join down the middle of the spruce at all. Whew. I'm actually shaking that, but that seems to have worked, and I still have a usable lump of spruce should anything go wrong. Result. Yay! I'm just trying to get a little bit more off this. I might try to use my method of no. What I've found is, now that this is nice and smooth, the sandpaper doesn't grip it, although you'd think so looking at that, but when I put it down on there, it just slips off and ends up sanding it. Wonder if it will do it. No, see, and vice versa. The rough side grips the sandpaper, but not the smooth side. So somehow I've got to do this with my fingers without rubbing the ends off my fingers. I really don't know how to do this. Although it might be easier just to put it on the guitar and sand it down once it's on the guitar, but the surface is really rather rough. Yeah, this is the problem I thought I was going to have. A compromise of sorts. Oh, yeah, it moves around too easily. Well, that's taken some of it off. I have actually got to be a little bit careful here that I don't take too much off. See, the problem with sanding it like that is what I found with trying to make the bridge patch is I've already took this corner down to almost paper thin. Well, it's down below 1 millimetre. So I know this surface is good. So we'll leave it there. We'll cut it out. We'll glue it on the board, on the guitar, and then we can finish the surface once it's on the guitar. I think that's the only safe way of doing it. Because the spruce is so thin, I'm just going to cut it out with a knife through the template. I hope this is as straightforward as it seems. I'm going to try to cut outwards just so that it creates a slight wedge for the tightest fit. Don't know whether I should have clamped this down first. This is very fiddly doing it through the template. I might have to take the template off and finish off by hand. I thought I could just cut it straight out while it's still under the template, but maybe not. No. I want to cut outwards. So that we have a slight wedge shape. And there we go, I am through. I think we're there. Nearly. Hooray! Let's go try that in the template. Well, it's oversize for the template, which is good. It might be time to bring on the guitar. We have something that fits very snugly in the template. It's a little bit oversized at the end here. I'll take a little bit more off that actually. Oh dear, I ought to look at the guitar rig, shouldn't I? Oh well. It is a little oversized. I'm going to have to do a little bit of fiddling to get this to fit. I could do it with sandpaper, but I think certainly for the edges I probably need the knife. Might try a combination of both. I will try sandpaper actually, because these should be straight edges. Doesn't take much to take it off with sandpaper. Got to be very careful here that I don't take too much off. Sandpaper takes it down really quite quickly. Good. So I'm ready to glue, other than I want to put some holes in the top, so I'm going to have to try and reach in and locate them with a drill. Just so happens that the drill is pretty much the length of the thickness of the guitar. Let's see if we can just give them a quick twizzle. See what we've done to that. Yeah, we've got 2 good indentations, so we can now drill those out. In case you're wondering why I'm preserving the holes, these are locating pins for the new bridge. I've done a little bit of sanding. I discovered that actually I can get pretty even results just with an ordinary sanding block rubbing over the top. So I've taken it down to 1.2 millimeters, which is just a little bit above where I need to be, and I'll take the rest down in situ, which could be tricky, but I don't see any other way of doing it really. I think it's the only way I'm going to get a consistent surface is to sand it once it's in place. So I'm going to use the original cauls. I'm going to pop it on there and locate it that way, but I will take the caul off after the initial clamping, because I want to remove as much squeeze out as I can. Doesn't appear to want to come out. Whoops. Yeah, there's a little bit of dried glue stuck in the nozzle, which then ended up on the work. I'm actually going to put a little bit more on so that there is actually squeeze out. And then it will squeeze around the edges of the work. Although I suppose I can put a little bit of glue over the edge. Yeah, this is going to be messy. Goes. The caul appears to be flush against the top of the guitar, and probably isn't. Right, let's get some clamps on, apply some initial pressure, and then we'll do a bit of cleanup. I do wonder whether clamping and then removing the clamps weakens the joint in any way. But I don't want to have too much glue on the surface of the guitar, so what choice do I have? Wonder whether I should have put all these clamps in first. There we go. Now remove the clamps. Job done.